everyone, Nicole Steckline, technical agronomist for DeKalb and Asgrow in Northeast Iowa. The thing we've all been waiting for, planting season, is finally here. I'm going to be spending a lot of time following planters, so here's what I'm looking for and how I'm looking for it. First up, if you've been using a pocket knife or even a seed finder, get yourself a putty knife. There will be no looking back. One of my retailers turned me onto this and I love it. So we don't have a whole lot of residue in this field. We take corn stalk bales off, but a main thing that I'm usually going to look for as I walk up to a row is I'm looking for residue, making sure it's off that row and checking to see if any of it's getting hairpinned inside of that row. Sometimes you will get those, you'll get the openers and it's just pushing it in there if the row cleaners haven't moved it off good enough. So particularly if you're doing a whole lot of tillage, really important step is to come in here on this row and kind of push out some of that air. The reason that's so important is if we don't do that and we measure our planting depth, we're measuring a lot of air, but as soon as we get a rain, it's gonna settle that soil down. And if we were to measure our planting depth at 2 inches, maybe 1.75 inches, it's probably gonna take out like 1/4 inch or so of that planting depth, depending on how fluffy that soil is. All right, next up, I'm just gonna go like crazy, not very careful until I find that first seed. After I find the first seed, I'm gonna slow down a little bit and I'm gonna measure over about 4 inches and start digging again there because these seeds should be about 6 inches away from each other, but I'm gonna go really slow. And with this putty knife, I'm just gonna take little slices off of that furrow because I wanna find that seed undisturbed so I can get an idea of how it's sitting in there. So here I found our seed in here and I'm gonna measure and we're looking right at about 2.5 inches, so right where we want it to be. The other thing that I'm looking for is I'm looking for any air pockets around this seed. So if it's a little bit too wet, or maybe I'm not running enough pressure down on my closing wheels, if I'm not destroying the sides of this seed trench, then I could get some air pockets around this seed, and meaning that I don't have very good seed to soil contact. And that could mean that if we dry out, it's gonna actually pull water away from the seed. I absolutely don't want that. So I'm looking for any air pockets around the seed. I'm also looking for any residue because, you know, residue is gonna pull water away from that seed too. So biggest things I'm looking for is seed depth, making sure there's good seed to soil contact, that trench is closing around that seed, giving us good seed to soil contact, and I'm looking to make sure I don't have much residue pinned. All of those could lead to changes in my row cleaners. It could change what I'm using for down pressure. It could also change the kind of pressure that I'm going to run on my closing wheel. So the importance of planting depth in corn, I like my corn 2 to 2.5 inches. I'd rather it be too deep than too shallow. Now, the big reason for this is because number one, we're trying to buffer that seed from the environment. So if you're planting at like 1.5 inches on corn, guess what? That top inch, 1.5 inches fluctuates a lot in temperature and a lot in moisture as well. We don't want to get that seed growing and then suck moisture back out of it if we get really hot and dry. The next reason it's really important is because when that seed germinates, right, that radicle starts growing down and the coleoptile starts growing up. Well, that coleoptile can start sensing sun and it knows when it's 3/4 inch from the surface. And that's where it's gonna set the crown and where that first set of nodal roots is going to start growing from. So once again, the deeper we can have those nodal roots, the better buffer we have from the environment. On soybeans, I wanna be running that about 1.5 inches. Now, the reason I'm not gonna run it at like 1 inch is because of herbicides. If I plant my soybeans too shallow, since we're using a lot of herbicides these days in soybeans, that top inch is gonna be pretty concentrated with herbicide. So I wanna get it below that herbicide concentration zone. That's all for now. It's a fun season, so have fun, be safe, and as always, call, text, or email with questions.